Angus. I found this chapter 4.3 more accessible than 4.1 and 4.2. I also liked how it brought in non-Western perspectives. It almost seems like we're rediscovering ways of living and educating from the past and other cultures. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, I agree, and I like that too. It makes me wonder how we in modern Western society ever got into a place where we looked at learning as mechanical and disconnected from living processes, health, family, peer, social, political, and ecological relationships. After reading this book, The Factory Approach of Standardized Education, which still seems to rule in many schools and governments, seems pretty strange and dysfunctional.
Do you think the more complex, progressive approaches described in these final chapters will ever reach schools and districts, especially those with a lower socioeconomic status and funding?
We are working on it from our end at the education faculty, and I'm starting to see some changes in school practices. But too many of my own kids' classes are still dominated by the sit still and take notes factory model. Bringing these approaches to poor areas might be even more challenging. For example, pretty well-known research from several decades ago showed that schools with poor students generally adopted a more factory-like standardized approach to education than affluent schools, where students were given more freedom. Students were given little or no opportunities to make choices or contribute to the classroom. I'm really not sure what the best way to change things would be, but it's not an easy fix. Changing things will no doubt be inextricably linked to wider social, economic, and political dynamics. We will have to consider all these levels if we really want to change things.
Some people in this class who are in the counseling stream have made links between the teacher-student relationship and the therapeutic alliance between counselors and clients. Do you see links there too?
Oh yes, I personally know more about adult professional education than other areas like counseling, but I think that both schools and counseling can be reframed in more complex and ecological ways. In the last few weeks, we focused on how complexity-oriented educators can treat students in classrooms as living systems that should be nurtured rather than as mechanical systems that need to be fixed. We also saw how learners can be seen as nesting within multiple ecological levels: biological, personal, social, cultural, etc. These approaches can also be seen in counseling, for example in Bronfenbrenner's social ecological model. Although my speculations are based on my limited knowledge of counseling, I would argue that complex approaches can also be seen in positive psychology and strength-based counseling or therapy. These approaches focus on treating people you counsel like living systems who have personal strengths and resourcefulness, rather than as deficient individuals who need to be fixed.
Having gone through this course and others with you, I get the sense that you draw upon ideas from this last moment, systemic sustainability education, as you structure your course.
Yes, I confess that that's true. I see people in our class individually and collectively as complex living systems that I can intellectually influence or nurture, but certainly not control. My goal in the course was to structure it so that you could explore existing educational thought, and also so that new ideas, interpretations, and so on might emerge for you, again, individually and collectively as groups.
Can you give that to me less abstractly and more practically? What actual things did you do in this online class that fit this model?
The short answer is that I thought about the author's conditions for complex emergence, i.e. learning. Here again is one recent formulation of those conditions: diversity and commonality, openness and constraints, neighboring interactions, and decentralized control. So first, I considered your diverse educational and experience and background. That's something you can pretty much count on in graduate education classes. Next, I thought about redundancy or commonality. That's the reason why we read the same chapters every week and why I clustered you into HPE, counseling, language learning, and other groups around similar interest areas. Second, I thought about balancing openness and constraints, that is, establishing enabling constraints. In our class, that meant setting out clear instructions about weekly readings, about the length and format of reading responses, and about when responses and activities had to be submitted. At the same time, I left the exact focus of your reading responses open to your discretion. The activities were also open to whatever creative ideas you came up with. although I did organize one activity myself as an example. Sometimes I wonder, actually, if that was too constraining because in some years, too many groups stick with that similar format. In any case, the purpose of these structures was not to dictate your thinking, but rather to open up space for you to articulate your ideas and share them with others. That's why I had you post reading responses in the discussion space, and why you had to respond to a few of your classmates. That part of the class was all about neighboring interactions. Obviously, I could not predict or control your thinking or interaction. The unfolding of your discussions on our class website emerged through your interactions. That is, the class organization was decentralized. The TA and I still had important roles to play as the consciences of the classroom, but we did not have centralized control, as a teacher might try to have in a traditional class. The class's emergent directions were not under any one person's control.
Does this mean you have to totally give up control and have a chaotic classroom?
No, that's just going to the opposite extreme, no organization. I'm talking about decentralized organization, like a democracy, say, not the extreme of total chaos or the other extreme of a rigidly organized dictatorship. Of course, teaching like this does mean that I have to give up traditional ideas about the teacher always controlling the class and dictating educational outcomes. Instead, it means that the TA and I think of ourselves as conscious, responsive, and responsible participants in the class. We're cool with that role. I think it actually makes classes more engaging, as in engaging minds. Haha. Again, I think that a similar dynamic might be applied to counseling if one focused on nurturing and engaging ethically and supportively with clients rather than trying to fix or control them.
Okay, well, Moment 4 has certainly left us with much to think about as we consider knowing, learning, and education and what the future could hold. Let's leave with Davis's own words as he says, teaching is about maintaining an awareness that knowing is constantly enacted and learning is always happening. That means that teaching isn't something that's done. Teaching is lived as one encounters self and other, individual and collective, past and future, actual and possible.